Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome back to yet another Sword of Convallaria video. So in this Sword of Convallaria video, I'm going to share the team building basics or just team building ideas in general for general PvE content pushing teams, where I talk about the different ideas that you guys want to take note of in terms of selecting the units you want to develop for your account moving forward. So I'll start with the very first pointer, and that is the skill synergies itself. So within this game, all the units have different skills. Pardon me because it's a little bit laggy here. So right here, right in the game itself, there are certain units with certain skill sets which has added benefits when it's activated on a specific group of characters. So take Ballista for example. So I'm using Ballista more as a single target damage dealer, but if I do intend to upgrade this skill of his to provide a buff for another ally from the Union faction, that ally will get a 20% shield. So just nice, you know, who's one of the strongest character in the game, right? The strongest character in the game obviously is none other than Gloria, and Gloria belongs to the Union faction. So when you think about this skill synergy itself, there are certain units that could benefit from certain skills of other characters, and that's where you can think of combo potential. For example, if I'm using Gloria as my main carry, then this buffing skill on her is actually pretty insane because it keeps her healthy as well as give her a 2-tier attack buff, which is quite big, which makes her damage output a lot higher and then make her a better carry from there. So that's one thing that you guys can consider, and that is skill synergy, right? Talking about the different synergies as well, we have the Leader's Aura. So Leader's Aura unlocks at tier 7 or rank 7. So there are specific units in the game with this banner icon which provides this skill called the Leader's Aura, which is basically a massive step buff to all units of the same faction in battle. So take Maisha's skill for example, it's a 10% attack increase and 20% defense increase or for Sword of Convallaria units in battle. So if we take a look at the different Sword of Convallaria units, we have one of the best damage dealer in the game, Barrow over here. We also have one of the best healers in the game, which is Inanna over here. So if you pair Inanna with Barrow with Maisha, you have a pretty decent core that can benefit quite a bit from the Flag of Convallaria leaders buff. At the same time, there's a bunch of other units that could benefit, right? For example, Momo over here, as well as Rawiwa. So if you don't have Barrow, you don't have Inanna, but you have the other sort of Convallaria characters, then you can obviously try to build them up and then use them together with Maisha for your general content pushing. So that's for point number 2. Okay, with that being said, right, the Leader's Aura is not an end-all be-all pointer because it's a relatively mid-game-ish content unlocked, which is level 35, so at least 1 week for most free-to-play players. And there are certain units with insanely good Leader's Aura, but just not being recommended because of the second pointer which we are talking about, and that is the general power level of the units. So general power level refers to obviously the tier list ratings of the character. So there are certain characters like, for example, Gloria, for example Cole, for example Barrow, they are pretty much recommended by everyone in their tier list. So these units are good units with very high power level, right? But if you take a look at Miguel over here, so this is another 5-star character which is very low on the tier list. This unit has a pretty insanely powerful Leader's Aura if you take a look at it. So as long as he's alive, right, you get a 15% attack buff and a 30% defense buff for all drifters, which is much higher than Maisha's buff, right? But why is he not top tier? Because number one, this character is not very tanky, so he doesn't survive long enough or survive well enough for the aura to take effect over the long course of battle. Secondly, Miguel's in general not a good unit, so it's not worth sacrificing the slot for just that Leader's buff. And lastly, right, the buff or the units that he can buff, they are generally, I would say, not the strongest. They are good, like you have the X-Girl, you have Cole, you have Abyss, but you have a lot of other better choices for general content pushing. Because when you put Miguel in your team, you are using up 1 slot for him, and you have to consider, right, is using a bad unit good for your team build itself? So for my case, it's no. That's why I'm not building up Miguel, even though he has an insanely good leader's buff. But that doesn't sort of omit the fact that I could try him in the future, because I do have him in my account. But at least in terms of just general progressing, I'm skipping him because he's in general a bad unit. So most of the time you just want to build up decent units you can use. So for this part, just got to refer to like the tier list for my CN tier list, or like the tier list from other websites or even other content creators, to have a better idea what are the units you want to focus on when you are building up your team itself. So the next concept, or the next pointer that I want to talk about, is you want to have team variety in terms of the roles of the character. So for example, now I'm using Crimson Falcon because I do have Cole, right? But if you already have Cole, right, I wouldn't advise you to build up Crimson Falcon, because they do the same thing, right? Their role is an assassin role. They go after enemies, they kill them, and then they run away to safety, right? If you already have Maisha, right, you don't want to train up another 4-star tank like Suppression, because they are both defender roles, they are both frontliners. So in that sense, right, you kind of want to have units from different roles, or doing different jobs, right, in your hero pool, so you can do the substitutions when necessary. So for my team over here, I'm using Crimson Falcon, the assassin, Maisha the frontliner, Gloria the general utility as well as AoE damage dealer, Angel the healer, and then for the last stop I'll be using Ballista and Stormbreaker more often. Stormbreaker for her AoE prowess, and then Ballista for the long range single target damage with debuff for the tip. So there are certain cases where I will need to use Abyss, because Abyss has a pretty good debuff as well. So these are the few factors to consider, right, in terms of the different roles of the character. So you don't want to have Ballista with another ranger build up. You also don't want to have Crimson Falcon with like multiple assassins in your build, because that way they will be sort of doing the same thing, and then you did rather have a more versatile team build itself. And one more thing to consider is with regards to the elements or the roles. So I'm always very confused with this, because like I will call this the element, but they call it the roles, so whatever. So one of the things to consider is with regards to having elemental coverage, because if you run like a full breaker team, then your team will be very weak to seekers, right? If you run a full defender team, then you'll be very weak to breakers. And this is one of the reasons why, right, the strongest team defensively is actually a full watcher team, because they don't have any direct counters. So this is one consideration that you guys can consider, right? Gloria with, I think, the light archer, with Inanna, as well as I think some watcher frontliner would do the job. Yeah, let me just double check who is a really good watcher frontliner. I think there isn't any really good watcher frontliner, but you can use Dandelion in that place, or maybe even Magnus in that place in terms of the frontliner role. So yeah, in general, that's that, right? These are the few pointers that you guys want to consider in terms of team building. So before I end off the video, I just want to say that those few pointers I shared, they are all sort of linked together, right? You have to make the consideration yourself based on the number of units you have, based on the different units you have under your collection. So if you're free to play, you play to the best of your abilities, and then if you're a whale, then you go for like obviously the strongest units I mentioned in each category, and then find a synergy between them, and that will be the best team for you. So the best team will be different for different people, but all these different factors, they will hold true for your general team building ideas itself. That's it for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and do remember to like, subscribe to see more. I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.